Most people in the sports card game make these 5 crucial mistakes, and in this video, I'm going to make sure you don't make any of them. And if you don't know who I am, hi, my name is Eric Michael. I've been buying and selling sports cards for the past 10 years and teaching people how to do it for the past 4 to busy professionals, people who have careers, people who want to make an extra few $1,000s a month on the side, and I think there's no better way to do it than buying and selling sports cards. But nonetheless, let's get into it. The top 5 brutal mistakes people make, and this comes from personal experience because I made all these mistakes you're about to see, and it cost me a ton of money. But let's get into number 5. The 5th biggest mistake, it is a simple one. This is overpaying, okay? Overpaying for cards. Now, this is a problem for a multitude of reasons because obviously if you're overpaying for something, you're already putting yourself behind the 8 ball. But what people do, this is what happens in the world of sports cards, okay? Let me explain. Let's say we got Paul Skeens, right? We all know Paul Skeens, the good pitcher on the Pirates. Can't miss him because he's dating Livy Dunn. Paul Skeens, right? Let's say we got a nice graph, and let's say in this graph, this is June, right? And at the end here, this is December. Well, as we get closer to the offseason, right, Paul Skeens might play good and bad, and once the offseason happens, whoop, right? And so he will go down from when the offseason begins to when we get into the depths of the offseason, which is now when I'm speaking in December. And what people will do is they will see in a card of Paul Skeens, let's say it's some Bowman Chrome autograph. The card doesn't matter in this situation. And this card sold in August, let's say August 21st. This card sold for $500, all right? And that's the last sale of this specific card of Paul Skeens. Now, as you can see from this graph, maybe this was August right here, and Paul Skeens' market is down since then. So this card that sold for $500, well, maybe there's no recent sales, but if this card sold today, it's probably only worth about $350. And people I don't believe me, I made this mistake a lot, but people make this mistake all the time because they don't look at the player's market. And a good way to look at the player's market would be this. So like, if you can see, I was messing around with Paul Skeens stuff before, but like if you go here and like you want to look at Paul Skeens' market, what you could do is go to Market Movers or really any app and look at his Bowman Chrome base autograph, right? So if we find his Bowman Chrome PSA 10 non-autograph, this is like a really solid card to get an indicator of his market because it's a liquid card, it's commonly sold. You can see, right? This card in like July was worth like 180, it bumped up and it's come down, right? And what people do is they'll see a comp or a sale of a card when it was here, not knowing that his market is down since, okay? And that's the 5th biggest mistake, but the biggest reason people make that mistake is because they don't understand how the market works. Just because a card sold for $500, it doesn't mean that card's worth $500 anymore. And the same goes for the opposite of what I'm saying here. If, let's say Paul Skeens' market is 300, it's went up since 3 months ago. Well, that card that sold for $300 months ago might be worth $500 today. But if you're doing that, try to use the last sale so you can get a good deal. But that's the 5th biggest mistake people make, overpaying. And if you thought that was a big one, this is an even bigger one. So number 4, the 4th biggest mistake people make is buying cards that are not liquid. Okay, and this is a more extensive training, and it's something else. It requires a whole other video for me to go into it. But let me explain to you how sports cards work, right? So you hear me talk about this all the time, right? Step number 1, you want to buy cards. You want to buy raw cards, right? Step number 2, grade these cards. Step number 3, sell cards, right? This is like the simple 3-step process here. Now, you have to understand something, okay? When you buy a card and grade it and sell it, let's pretend it's a PSA 10, PSA 10. The card doesn't really matter in this situation. Prism, CJ Stroud, okay? Let's pretend this is the card you bought, graded, and you're about to sell it. When you sell this card of CJ Stroud, think about this. If you're selling a card that's already graded as a 10, who are you most likely selling that card to? Well, you are selling this card to most likely some sort of CJ Stroud. I don't know why I keep capitalizing that T. Collector, right? So a collector of CJ Stroud, if you're buying CJ Stroud and you think he's a good player and you want to hold him for the long term or for the season, you want to buy his best cards. And in football, for example, the best football cards would be like Prism, Optic, Donruss, and I'm probably missing a few here. Contenders. These are just a few of like what people would consider the good football cards. The best ones are probably Contenders and Prism right here. But what people will do is they'll follow everything I'm saying here and buy cards, get them graded, have the timing right, all that stuff. But they just buy the wrong stuff, and they're buying stuff nobody wants. And when you buy stuff nobody wants, one, you're going to have a difficult time selling it. Two, you're going to get lowballed. And three, when you buy that card to get it graded, you're not going to make the amount of money you want because it doesn't have the same desire as, a CJ Stroud Prism PSA 10 would, as opposed to some other random schmucky product like Leaf or something like that. So that is the fourth biggest mistake people make, buying not liquid cards, okay? And believe me, your boy made that mistake more than you could imagine, all right? So that's step number 4, or that's mistake number 4. Mistake number 3 here would be, you have overpaying for cards, and then when people sell cards, they are overpriced, okay? Let me explain to you why being overpriced is a terrible thing, all right? Let's walk through that step by step again, right? Let's say step number 1, you buy card for, let's say, $100, right? And let's say step number 2, we grade it. We grade this nice card. Step number 3, this card grades a 10. Oh, whoops, that is not how to spell PSA. This card grades a 10, right? And now this card is worth $300. Congratulations. Let me explain something. What every single person does, or I would say 99% of people, is they try to sell this card here for $300, right? They want to get $300 or $295, and they want every single last penny, okay? And this is a terrible thing to do for 2 reasons, right? So first off, I always recommend, when I tell students or anyone, try to sell cards for about 10% less than market value, okay? So instead of selling this card for $300, sell for about $270. What's going to happen when you sell that card for $270? Well, you're going to be able to sell it like that, number 1, and number 2, you get money quicker, so you can reinvest it quicker, right? So let's play out the 2 scenarios, right? Let's say scenario number 1, right? We sell the card for $270, and scenario number 2, right? We sell the card for $300, right? Let's say these are the 2 scenarios. Well, let's pretend, for example, let's put it in green here. So let's pretend we sell this card for $270. So number 1, right? You're gonna sell it ASAP, right? Because it's really easy to sell a liquid card for under market value. Number 2, now you have, right? You have $270 to reinvest, right? You have it right away. And number 3, you can repeat this same exact process and take that $270 and double it again. So now 2 months later, right? 2 months later, you now have $540. Let's pretend you doubled that money. And you were able to get this money quicker because you were sold it quicker because you were slightly under the market value, right? So cash is worth more to you today than it is months into the future, right? Makes sense. And also, when you do this, when you're selling cards for slightly under market value, you gain relationships, you build trust with people, people want to do deals with you, right? But let's say you don't do that, and let's say you want every single last dollar. Well, you might have to wait, 1 to 2 months to sell this card for $300 because nobody wants to pay exactly what it's worth, right? People always want to pay slightly under. And now you have $300, but you have it, a month or 2 late, and you could take that $300 and flip it. But now you have, let's pretend it's 4 months later. 4 months later, you've doubled this $300, and now You have 600, right? So the question you have to ask yourself, right? Would you rather have $600 in 4 months or $540 in 2 months? This is a very basic, generic, broad example, right? Like, there's no absolutes here, right? You could sell this card for $300 and it might sell right away. But this is just generally speaking. You would rather have this one because you'd rather have $540 in 2 months. You could do the same thing again, right? And then 4 months later, I'm running out of room here. You double that again. Let's say you have 1,000, right? So you have $1,000 in 4 months instead of having $600 in 4 months. A lot of numbers, I know. But that is essentially the third biggest mistake people make. And if you thought that was bad, wait till number 2. So number 2, and this is actually probably the most basic one, okay? So number 2, the second biggest mistake people make is they don't follow something I call the 2x rule. And this applies to when you buy raw cards and get them graded. So standard rule of thumb you want to follow is you want to at least double your money when sending a card in for grading if this card is going to grade a 10. So let's play out an example here, right? Let's say you buy a card and you pay, I don't know, $100. Let's keep the math simple. Now, you're going to spend, let's pretend you're using the lowest level to get a card graded. Your grading cost is going to be roughly $19. And if this is the scenario, you want to at least, right, if your total investment is $119, you want to at least try to get to $38 back in your pocket if this card grades a 10. Now, in order to get to $38, you can expect a 10% fee wherever you sell the card, eBay, Facebook, right? Because you might have to sell it under market value. So you really need a PSA 10 to sell for roughly, like $260 to $270 to make this happen, right? So if you're buying a card for, let's say, $100, you want to make sure as a 10, this card at least sells for about $260 to $270. So you could at least double your money, right? But believe it or not, what people do all the time, and I don't understand why people do this, because if you go on eBay or Facebook or wherever, you can literally see what cards sell for. Like, it will literally tell you a PSA 10 of this card sells for X amount of money. But what people will do is, I still can't believe people do this, right? They'll buy this card for $100, knowing that a PSA 10 is like $170. You can't make any money, right? Because you have to pay a $19 grading cost. Then after $170 fees, right, you're going to end up netting, right, maybe like $145, something like that. So, you're putting in all this effort to make $20, $30 at the end of the day. It doesn't really make much sense, right? So don't do that. Try to at least, and you're not going to be perfect, right? But you want to at least make sure you can double your money at the end of the day, okay? That's number 2. And number 1, the most important thing and the biggest mistake people make that just costs people so much money. An unbelievable amount of money. Give me a drum roll, please, because it is timing. Okay? So, I talk about this all the time. And sometimes people listen to me, sometimes people don't, right? But there's a timing aspect to sports cards, right? So let's take 3 sports, right? We have baseball here. And then let's say we have football here, right? These are like the 3 big sports. I'm not talking about the others. And let's say we have basketball here. Well, once again, this is a whole nother training that this is going to involve. But baseball, right? What you want to do is you want to try to buy baseball in like November to December in the off season and sell, right, February to March, right before the season kicks off, because most players go down in value once the season starts. Football, you want to try to buy football. Football's a bigger window, but like February to May roughly, and sell July. Hopefully you like these colors here. August, right? And basketball, you want to try to buy basketball in, June to August and sell September to early October, roughly. And the reason why this is so important is because, number one, if you're buying a card to get graded, like picture this, for example, right? Let's say, right, you buy a football card in, right, let's say you pay, $100 in February, and you get this card back from grading. You get this card back from grading in, let's see, like, I don't know, May. Pretend it's a long time, but it's okay. Hopefully, during this time frame, as we get closer to the football season and things happen in the offseason, the player you're buying, appreciates, the goal is appreciates 10 to 20%, right? So not only are you making money from buying a card, it grading a 10, but while it's at the grading company, it appreciates 10 to 20%. That's the overall goal. And the reason why this is so important, to show you an example on Market Movers, and to show you like kind of the opposite of what I just talked about. So if we go to like CJ Stroud, for example, he's a good example. CJ Stroud, whoops, spelled that wrong. Silver Prism PSA 10, okay? So if you look here, CJ Stroud's someone who's having a decent season, not an amazing season, but you can see this card, went up a little bit before the season. It got to almost like $1,000-ish. It, went up like 10, 15%. And then once the season starts, what happens? Well, people realize maybe he's not the next Mahomes, or he's really good. And right here, where my cursor is, it's inflated. And anything that's inflated, if it doesn't keep performing at a crazy rate, it shoots down. And what happens? Whoop-de-doo, it shoots down. So what people will do is they'll buy cards right before the season, like right here, and get them back from grading right here, and you can't make money, right? If the card dropped in value in half by the time you got it back from grading, you're screwed. You can't make any money. And that's why timing is the most important aspect, and I think it's the number one mistake people make because it is the most difficult to see and understand, because the newbie collector, the newbie person in sports cards thinks, oh, the football season's starting. Let me go buy my favorite player. Terrible idea. Don't do that. But hopefully this makes sense. Just to sum it up for you guys one more time. Number one, we have timing. Number two, we have the 2x rule. People not understanding profit margins, essentially. Number three, we have overpriced. Number four, we have buying cards that are not liquid. Number five, we have overpaying. And overpaying kind of like goes along with timing here, because people overpay because they don't understand the timing of markets. So, but these are the big five. These are the top 5 mistakes I see people in sports cards make. Hopefully, now that you're seeing this, you don't got to make these mistakes. But if you like this video, I'll throw another video or two above my head. That's a nice follow-up to this one. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.